Welcome to Newslaundry Chhota Hafta. For the full episode, subscribe because it is behind the paywall and only subscribers get access to uncut, complete content. Newslaundry Hafta is our weekly wrap of all that made the news, all that didn't, and all that should have, and all that shouldn't have. We agree, we disagree, we critique, and occasionally we beat each other up. But it's all good fun. Subscribe.
This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज़ लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Hafta from an extremely rainy Delhi. It has been raining since morning. We are recording this at 3 in the afternoon on Thursday, the 22nd of September. And ever since I got to office this morning, which is around 10ish, it has not stopped raining. So, as Raman sir said, the prediction was that there will be no rain this week.
Yeah.
But there's been more rain today than there has been throughout this year. So, on that note, I hope you are all safe and dry wherever you are listening to us from. Today, before I introduce our guests, and we have two guests who will give us a more accurate and closer account of something that's been making the headlines for at least 3 days of this week in all sorts of bizarre ways on Indian broadcast news. But before I introduce them, let me introduce our regular in-house panel. We have in the studio Mehraj D Lone. Hi, Mehraj.
Hello.
Raman Kirpal.
Hi.
Joining us from Chennai is Jayashree. Hi, Jayashree.
Hi.
And joining us on the phone line from the United Kingdom are two guests, Amrit Wilson. Hi, Amrit.
Hi.
Hi, Amrit. And Sunny Hundal. Hi, Sunny.
Hello.
So let me introduce our two guests first. Amrit is a writer, journalist and activist who since the 70s has focused on issues of race and gender in Britain and South Asian politics. Her book, released in 1978, Finding a Voice, Asian Women in Britain, the link to which you can find in the show notes below, won the Martin Luther King Award and remains an influential feminist book. She's also a member of South Asia Solidarity Group, a long-established organization based in London, which has been campaigning against the forces of Hindutva for more than 2 decades. As a journalist, her work has been published in outlets including Ceasefire magazine, Media Diversified, Open Democracy, Economic and Political Weekly, and The Guardian. So, Amrit, we look forward to hearing your views. And Sunny Hundal, he's a journalist, a writer, and a political commentator. He's been writing for the BBC and has previously worked with The Guardian, Hindustan Times, and The Independent. And more recently, you may have seen a Twitter thread of his that kind of became really popular to give first-hand accounts of what was happening in Leicester. But before we get to the discussion, we'll just get the headlines. Jayashree, can you please give us the headlines for the week?
Yeah. So here are the headlines. RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat met members of the Muslim community in Delhi. It was a recent closed-door meeting where he asked them to clear their stands on different issues. The biggest news of the week would be that tensions erupted in the British city of Leicester following an India-Pakistan cricket match on August 28th. A flare-up was also reported on September 17th between Hindu and Muslim groups after a protest march was held. The Indian High Commission to the UK has sought immediate action from authorities on the violence.
In fact, that's happening as we speak. Jai Shankar had something. But, coming to the first headline, after this meeting with many Muslim intellectuals and religious leaders had with Mohan Bhagwat, one of them has said, I forget what he heads, that he is the Rashtrapita hai, he is the father of the nation, and whatever he says is right. We should all get along with each other. And I was like,
Really?
Yeah, I'll just tell you who he is.
He's just being candid. I mean, that's true, right?
Not for me, it ain't. But yeah.
There's a bunch of media headlines now. INB Minister Anurag Thakur on Monday called for neutrality in news. He said loud debates on television may get attention, but not credibility.
Wow.
And 2 days later, the Supreme Court followed this up by also talking about TV news and anchors. It said they often escape getting any punishment for giving space to hate speech. He said it's a duty of an anchor to see that hate speech does not continue the moment someone starts, but anchors are not being dealt with firmly.
So yeah, the Supreme Court is putting it on the anchors.
Not just on the anchor, they have also spoken about the government, why they remain mute on these issues.
Yes.
So I mean, maybe Anurag Thakur raised his voice. I think it is too late.
Or maybe he may have an idea of what was to come.
Another media update in the TRP scam, which we'll all remember from 2020. The Enforcement Directorate has given a clean chit to Republic and Republic Bharat, while it has said India Today is under further investigation. Its charge sheet said it found no evidence against Republic, and it also did not name Arnab Goswami. The ED also said that the Mumbai police's investigation was in variance with its own. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal on Sunday alleged that Prime Minister Modi's advisor Hiren Joshi had warned the editors and owners of several news channels not to cover his party ahead of the assembly election in Gujarat.
Good to see that some things haven't changed, like things that are whispered in Delhi for years. Arvind has a habit of, like the Vadra case also. He has a habit of saying from pulpit. Now, of course, he'll be sued because he can't prove it.
But there's always been like this one person somewhere around the PMO who is kind of dictated, like back when Brajesh Mishra was the NSA, through to Jaitley and all the others.
We don't have any Brajesh Mishra now. In fact, we have many Brajesh Mishras allocated for each ministry. And they reign supreme in their own arena.
But of course, no one complied the way they comply now.
Yes.
I mean, it is like...
But that's because the media landscape has also changed a lot since that time.
Also, the economics has changed,
The NIA on Sunday said it had raided 40 locations in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana in connection with alleged terror links of the Popular Front of India. Then on Thursday today, over 100 were arrested in anti-terror raids against the PFI in 11 states. I think the maximum arrests were made in Kerala.
Yeah,
22 people.
We'll discuss this, I guess, in little detail later in this episode.
And a very controversial headline of the week, which is that Wipro has fired 300 employees for working for competitors. They call this moonlighting. So they said there is no place for them.
Right. We shall discuss this in a little detail also later in this episode.
Former Punjab Chief Minister Amrinder Singh on Monday joined the Bharatiya Janata Party in New Delhi. He also announced the merger of his outfit, which is the Punjab Lok Congress, with the BJP. I don't think anyone is surprised.
Yeah, no one is.
Or anybody cares.
Yeah, or anybody cares, more importantly.
More news from Punjab is that the governor has rejected the AAP government's demand for a special session of the assembly to introduce a confidence motion. Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann has now said the cabinet will convene an assembly section on September 27th and that they will approach the Supreme Court against the governor's decision. I believe the AAP is also holding a protest march to the Punjab Raj Bhavan.
Today, yeah. So, I mean, they're saying if they get a full state, then they'll be allowed to function. Guess what? No, they won't.
I have to say, though, like, one thing about Arvind Kejriwal is that every single week he manages to figure in at least 2 or 3 headlines.
Yeah, man.
Like, even though these are headlines across the country, he somehow makes himself, like, in the news.
No, in fact, BJP is looking out, for any controversy. I mean,
because
the
Gujarat,
latest...
like for example, the
not just
the Daru
Gujarat,
one.
the latest, I mean, very
Man.
small, no, but not even Bhagwant. Bhagwant is over. Now the another one which is coming up, that they are appointing up, members in government bodies and giving them salaries, as good as an IAS officer gets. So that's the latest which has come
Oh,
out.
really?
Today.
We shall get to the bottom of that as well.
In Gandhinagar, protests were held inside the assembly and outside the secretariat, where the first day of the monsoon session began. 10 Congress MLAs were suspended by the speaker. In Aligarh, the police have booked Hindutva supremacist Yatti Narsinganand for calling for the demolition of madrasas and Aligarh Muslim University. He said they should be blown to bits with gunpowder. The CBI has told the Supreme Court it found no criminality during its inquiry into the Radia tapes. And finally, in Iran, protests have broken out after a 22-year-old woman died days after being detained by the regime's morality police for allegedly not complying with the country's hijab regulations.
Right.
And the police have released a video and the victim's family says it's edited, which shows that she kind of tries to show that she collapsed on her own. She wasn't beaten up and all that stuff. But the family are saying it's an edited video, so you can't trust it.
And there is a bar-related headline which Republic going at India Today. We'll come to that a little later. But first, let's discuss the main, issue that we were discussing this week's Hafta, which is the violence at Leicester.
The fact is that people were playing it down as if it was not a big deal. Yet, for a lot of Muslims in the town, it felt like this was a culmination of attacks as well as sort of rising tension against them, because there have been other incidents between Hindus and Muslims there. And so a lot of Muslims, a gang of Muslims felt like they needed to respond back. So they went around some of the houses, Hindu-dominated houses in Leicester, and then started attacking people. One of them had a knife, and then ripped up a flag in front of the Hindu house. I don't know the exact nature, but I've seen the videos. So that led to lots of Hindus passing around these videos and saying, look, the Muslims are attacking us in our homes, in our communities. We need to mobilize against them. As you can imagine, this kind of stuff happens in India all the time, that it basically led to this escalation on both sides, on the Hindu side as well as the Muslim side, saying that the other community is coming for us. The police is not going to help, so we have to mobilize ourselves. And it led to the situation where on Saturday, just the Saturday gone past, in Leicester, in the morning, about 300 Hindus turned up in Leicester. And a lot of those people were from outside. They had been mobilized through social media, WhatsApp, etc., and decided to turn up and sort of show force, basically, and say to Muslims that we are, not going to take. We're going to protect our community.
What we find, though, is that the RSS, which has an overseas wing called the HSS, Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, has established itself very solidly in Britain. And this is something we cannot ignore, because it also influences the political parties, it influences day-to-day life, and so on. What we have in Leicester, therefore, is since from the 80s and 90s, the RSS, the first office in Britain was set up in 1966. And initially, it was quite a small office and there were not many members. But when the East African nations came, they had already been indoctrinated by the RSS in places like Uganda, where there were very early shakas and so on. So they basically set up and joined the various branches of the affiliated organizations which the HSS set up. So there were, they took over temples, they had women's organizations, and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. And by the 80s and 90s, we find that the Hindutva forces were able to exploit the multicultural policies of the state to get more resources, more funding, and so on. And as a result, they became very much a thriving force. They were carrying weapons, they were hooded. The next day, a lot of blue surgical gloves were found on the ground. These are to avoid fingerprints.
Yeah, I saw the videos of them.
Yeah,
but
so,
I was a little surprised at how mild the cops are in London. I mean, Indian cops and American cops. If Indian cops would have clobbered, a few heads would have been split open, and the American cops would have emptied out their magazines. What is this well, like? I can't quite understand how.
I think interestingly, in the same time, the one day before that, a man called Chris Kaba was driving a car in London, and he was shot by the police. He was unarmed. He was simply doing his own business, whatever. He was going somewhere. He was shot dead. He was a black man. So, I mean, the level of cop violence is enormous. Okay. But in general, it's targeted at either black people or Muslims. Because we mustn't forget that there is a huge and very powerful narrative of Islamophobia as a result of the war on terror.
Let me just disagree with Amrit here for a second. I think there's a bit of nuance here. What the problem is partly in these situations is that the police does not interfere or like to interfere when it's a religious tension. And I saw this even when Sikh mobs were attacking gurdwaras for allowing interfaith marriages, something I wrote about in about 3, 4, 5 years ago, actually. And I'm from a Sikh background itself, and I was urging the police to do something about the fact that the police people were not going into gurdwaras and stopping these mobs from attacking someone's big day. And the police then later met with me and said, we don't actually like to interfere in these sort of events. We'd rather let community leaders deal with these problems.
Which is the same statement they gave here. You're right.
So in this situation, even in Smethwick, Birmingham, we knew that there were going to be protesters outside a Hindu temple. And it's ridiculous that the police did not stop them from getting there, or at least arrest some of them. Because frankly, you should not be letting people protest or have a mob outside a religious place of worship, because that leads to far more violence and leads to far more inflaming of tensions. So in fact, in this time round, the police has done almost nothing and said, we'll let the religious community leaders deal with it.
I think if you look at this and you look at that bulldozer parade that took place in Edison, New Jersey a few weeks ago, I think these are clear signs that sort of Hindu nationalism and Hindutva are sort of marking itself abroad. And it's undeniably becoming a phenomenon that's perhaps not restricted to within Indian borders. But one thing I wonder about is that I think Hindu nationalists love to talk about Hindu phobia as an active issue in the Western world. And maybe Sunny and Amrit can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that is at best an exaggeration, because I would imagine that what you find in the West is common racism, because you're brown or you have a beard or a turban. There's not wider knowledge to distinguish between groups as Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh. But Islamophobia became distinct after 9/11, which became sort of separate from baseline racism. And while anti-Hindu bigotry might exist in countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, I would imagine that it's not necessarily so in the West. It's not a category of significance that they would like to imagine. But do you think more instances of this sort of riots and violence and so on, that could lead to a greater level of prejudice against Hindu communities at large, even though most Hindus in immigrant communities would not subscribe to it? Is that likely?
Yeah.
The question of Hindu phobia, we need to also think about what exactly we mean. I mean, do we mean prejudice against Hindus? Well, there may well be prejudice. But if we're talking about it in a more systematic way, just as we can talk about racism or Islamophobia, it has to have some sort of historical or material basis, And certainly in Britain, that's not the case. I mean, it's very much, I have lived as a Hindu all these years in this country. And certainly when I first came here for many years, I used to wear saris, have a bindi, and so on. I was never attacked as a Hindu. I was attacked as a brown person, right? But never as a Hindu. So the question of Hindu phobia is complex, whereas Islamophobia is held together by the war on terror rhetoric. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing similar which actually strengthens Hindu phobia. But I think Sunny is right when he says that the actions of the BJP actually increase prejudice and hatred up to a point against Hindus.
Yeah, I agree. I think
because think about Sikhs. I mean, Sikhs endlessly talk about 1984 because people suffered. People talk. Muslims know about Gujarat, right? So these things do matter. What happens in India inevitably gets reflected here.
PFI, they have been building up a case against PFI. And that's how I think most of people like us came to know about it. Since 2014, if you see, whether it is NIA or ED or CBI, or even the state governments where the BJP is ruling. So they are the ones who, only in one state it is banned. Not
Jharkhand it's banned.
Jharkhand. Only in Jharkhand.
I'll just check. Only Jharkhand? I thought it was banned in a couple of states.
Only in Jharkhand, not anywhere else. So, but they are bringing up, some single cases or a couple of cases where, I mean, even Kapan was, called a PFI sympathizer or something. So they are trying to, build up a negative image of this organization. We don't know much about it, excepting the fact that they come up with some some kind of newspaper, or and also they come up with statements which is in favor of their community, but we don't know much about their terror activities. Nothing has proven, and all the cases which are there in the court already against individual PFI, the so-called individual PFI members, nothing has proven against them.
There is more evidence against members of the RSS, whether it was, the cases, some of them are still happening, some of them hearings are only not happening. one of the accused is an MP now. But I read up about it. It's a not-for-profit. It is a volunteer-based organization. It is ideologically, I've gone over some of the utterances of some of the leaders. But I still haven't been able to figure out specifically, like, the stated objective of the RSS, and I've understood, and I guess I've read a lot more about the RSS, is a Hindu Rashtra, whether they state it or not. That is their purpose. And they have many other fituras they put in, but that is what they want. Ki Hinduon ko ek Hindu Rashtra banao. I have seen some of the statements of the PFI. I have seen some of the very unfair reportage by mainstream channels of it. But I still don't know much about it. And I'm guessing 80% of our audience know nothing about it, which is why I think we should do a deep dive on who they are, what is their objective. It was a merger of two outfits, one from Tamil Nadu, one from Kerala. Why did they merge?
Some in Karnataka also. That's the part of the reason why a lot of people don't know about it, because it's in the south. So mostly in the south. And from what I understand, I don't claim to know a lot about it, is basically, so it was a collection of a lot of these sort of very conservative Muslim organizations, socio-religious organizations in the mold of Jamaat Islami, which like say that you want to transform Muslim society, more religion, more morality, this, that and everything. But I think from what I've understood from talking to people, and this is the reason they're going after them, is because PFI is mostly active in Kerala and the coastal part of Karnataka, so along the Malabar belt. And that's where RSS, all these Hindutva organizations have been trying to do that thing.
Right.
And these guys are kind of like standing in the way.
Oh, that.
And more than that, from that part of the world, a lot of the people work in the Gulf and they have made a lot of money. And they have come back and they have set up businesses, huge malls, this and that, which doesn't sit well with the local, the Hindu-Muslim divide, if it was that. So these are the people in that part of the world, at least, who you can't just roll over.
Right.
So there are some very serious allegations only against them, especially in Karnataka, Kerala. They're accused of political killings. But so is like CPIM.
The RSS. Yeah.
CPIM also.
Forget the RSS, even CPIM. Are you going to ban them tomorrow or like raid them? Yeah, but that's what I know about it.
Right. Jayashree, you have anything to add? Since one of the...
No, I don't know enough about the PFI to really offer an opinion, except that I know that the Indian government has cited them time and again for things like the CA protests, the Delhi riots, Hathras, the Karnataka hijab conspiracy. They said that the students were working in collusion with the PFI.
Right.
So I would be very interested to know the deep history of it.
And
but as to the optics of these raids now, I'm not...
And the max
sure,
they have come up with that these PFI individuals, they were going for some protest. So that's the maximum crime, the corroborative evidence that they have got.
For me, the clincher was accusation number 2, radicalization. मैंने कहा साले bloody radicalization issue, all the channels should be shut down, yeah? How is that a crime?
Which the Supreme Court has certified today.
Yeah, what the Supreme Court?
It is the TV channels who are
spreading hate, yeah.
See, but I don't think what the Supreme Court said about the anchors is of any consequence, because I think what is the point of observations and remarks? We need to discuss the Supreme Court orders. If it's in a judgment, then yes. If it's just a judge passing his opinion in open court, it honestly doesn't make a difference to anyone's life.
No, also more than that, I think some of what they have said is kind of either it's disingenuous, they are so far removed from ordinary life, or it's, sorry to say, a joke. Because what they're saying is basically, like you were saying earlier, they're saying this, but if you are framing your entire evening debate about allegations against PFI, how are you going to control hate speech? Even if you say like very normal things, that will be that. And then there's the problem of how do you define hate speech? And some of the things, for example, they're saying anchors should do like this. When somebody says, that's not the Supreme Court's job to dictate how an anchor should conduct his show. And I think the whole focus is on when they call these like nutty people on the shows and they say some nutty stuff, you should stop them. But it's the anchors who are starting doing that in the first place.
Exactly. The nutter has been chosen for that purpose.
I think the larger point, I think the larger point that Supreme Court has been making, that you have to come up with some kind of structure, like
a structure, regulatory structure.
Basically, they are not saying that they are going to do it, but that should set rules for each kind of debate. So I think it's just the beginning.
Yeah, I think.
But the fact that somebody has
I think it's very important.
Made a little noise about it.
So this is a very particularly Indian thing, that if you work for one company, you can't work anywhere else. And it's not restricted to software and elsewhere. For example, in the media outside of this country, in the US, in Europe, you can work for multiple organizations at the same time. And you have contracts with each of them. And you have particular contractual obligations that you do this and this and this, and you don't do this and this. But I can understand, like in an industry like a software industry, right? Where you are competing with the other people, and you are like, say, working on an R&D project. You wouldn't want your person doing that same for your rival also. But that should be, I think the way to deal with that is, when you're hiring somebody, you should have like very specific contractual obligations. Like, these are the things, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do this, you're supposed to do this, but see the contract, read it well, and then sign it. And then take it out. Not this, okay, kuch bhi chalta hai, and then, oh, you did something wrong, we'll fire you. Not like that.
Jayashree?
See, okay, at one level, if you are working for a competitor, then yes, I think there is a conflict of interest and that is a problem. However, moonlighting in general, I'm completely in favor. I'm completely in favor of workers moonlighting if they have to, especially when a lot of these tech companies and most other companies get away with paying their employees much less than optimal salaries. So if you need to make more money and you're moonlighting and working a second job, then that's fine. Rishabh Premji had also said that he's willing to have conversations candidly if and also, we have to remember that when we're saying moonlighting, they're not only talking about a job at a competitor. They're also talking about things which Rishabh Premji himself said, such as playing in a band or working in a project over the weekend. So what if I start a baking business on the side? Am I moonlighting because I'm making money from some other way? So does your contract explicitly prohibit it? I think Business Today had a report where they said they'd reviewed Wipro's employee contracts. They said the company actually allows employees to take up secondary employment with permission. It is not barred in their contracts per se. So I don't think moonlighting is necessarily dual employment. It's not a formal employer-employee relationship. So these are also factors that have to be taken account to just sort of blanket have all these CEOs and all coming forward now and saying, yeah, we are strongly against it, and it's so unethical and all. I think it doesn't account for a host of factors. The only reason in which I would agree is that, yes, if you are working for a competitor, then it is a conflict of interest, and that is unethical, and that is a problem. In all other cases, I think it should be completely open and between them. And why aren't workers disclosing? Because I don't think many workers have faith in their employers to not take action against them based on what is disclosed and what is not, right? Like, how confident would someone be in telling their boss that, yeah, I am doing this on the side, and hope that their boss doesn't hold it against them? So,
and also, if it isn't something that like conflicts with your contract, it's not your boss's business to know what you're doing on the side.
Exactly. Like if I'm playing in a band and getting like 500 rupees for playing a guitar.
I think it also, I mean, it depends on what you're doing.
Also, the kind of discussion this should lead to is, why are people being like, other than like somebody has a hobby, play in a band, do gardening? If people are actually looking for like another job, doing something on the side, what does that say about your company? You're not paying people well, or you're not giving them
Rishabh Premji
what they
should be
get.
introspecting. Instead, he is ranting. That is my final word.
In moonlighting in Wipro case, there is a contractual obligation. Very clearly says that you cannot work for the competitors. You cannot work other than working. The contractual obligation is very clear. There, number one. Secondly, in most of the cases, they were not doing gardening job. They were not.
They were doing tech jobs.
They were not following their hobby of cooking. Nothing. In 99.9% cases, it was that they were moonlighting. They were actually in their spare time or whatever. They were, working for the...
In all fairness, a lot of the tech jobs that Newslaundry's got done have been done by guys who've been hired who are working for Microsoft Oracle systems or someone. I mean, they've done...
I also know many such people.
All of you listening in, the Chhota Hafta, do subscribe so you can listen to the entire Hafta. We will see you again next week with the Hafta. Till then, subscribe, pay to keep news free, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Thank you. Goodbye.
All the Newslaundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to Newslaundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sun liya Afrika, mufat khoro. Not to brag or anything, But Newslaundry Hafta features in the top 50 in the world on SoundCloud in the news and politics category for podcasts. So do subscribe and see what you're missing, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Subscribe, help keep news independent and free. All Newslaundry podcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher and any other podcast platform.